ओम परतत्वे सदा लीनो रामकृष्ण समाज्ञया यो धर्म स्थापन रतो वीरेशम तम नमाम्यहम. We have been studying here Swami Vivekananda's Jnana Yoga, and in that two chapters, two lectures are on macrocosm, on cosmic. The name is the cosmos. Cosmos, we have seen, is the universe when looked at as an orderly, systematic system or unit. Universe when looked at as orderly something is called cosmos. And in that there are two clear orders. One is the external world or the gross world, and that is called macrocosm. And that we studied in Swamiji's first lecture. And it started by Swamiji telling that nothing can come out of nothing, and so we accept the theory of evolution, that is only change of form, but they should accept our involution, because nothing can come out of nothing. So, if the highest intelligence is the last, then it must have been the beginning. It must have been involved. And in that case, what happens? The world becomes a cyclic order. It negates the so-called Big Bang theory or steady state theory. The world moves in cycles. And who it is who is involved? The highest intelligence. And Swamiji says that highest intelligence can be called God. Why God? That Swamiji has explained. All our ideas of holiness, all our desires, all our ambitions, all our reasoning, all our feelings are centered in that word God. And so, God in his impersonal aspect and also personal is involved, and that evolves as the whole universe. That is Swamiji described in the lecture on cosmos, the macrocosm. Then Swamiji said that this external search while man is doing, he feels that he should go within himself. And within himself is the nearest place where he can catch the reality. Because the outside reality is the same as my own reality, so why not search it near? And in that Swamiji showed that there are indriyas, organs which perceive things. But they cannot perceive things unless there is a mind. And Swamiji established the presence of the mind. And now, mind also cannot perceive unless there is consciousness, what is called intelligence here. That I see, it's a physical phenomenon. How come that I know it? Now, this knowledge, I knowledge, is a reflected knowledge. So, of what is that reflection? Something constant has to be reached. Otherwise, if that is also reflection, then whose reflection? So, that constant knowledge, consciousness is God or Brahman. For that, I am the reflection. And that from this reflection comes my knowledge, which I gain through mind and indriyas. This Swamiji has explained. Now this leads to another point, that I am being born again and again. This reincarnation comes because the body is nashwar, evanescent. Mind is also waxing and waning. So there is that constant factor called consciousness has to take many bodies until it realizes its own real nature. Now, gross-minded people are not ready to accept this. So, Swamiji, harping upon that nothing can come out of nothing, says, they say that we cannot remember our last life. Swamiji says memory cannot be the criteria for existence. We do not remember many things of our childhood. Does it mean we did not exist then? And so, memory cannot be the criteria. Then, why there are these instincts in us? Why do a duckling immediately goes to water? Why the other beings come out of, go away from water? Why in that particular species man gets the sanskaras? If you can try to explain it from heredity, it is not possible. Because first thing is physical cannot contain something mental, which is subtler. Secondly, the heredity is valid only in supplying body to that soul and that mind. So I had been a duckling, and I know that water is favorable to me by my past sanskaras. And that leads us to think that it is only reincarnation which can explain all the facts of my life. Then Swamiji comes to another beauty of this theory of incarnation, and that is the topic we could not complete last time and we are taking up today. And that topic is the last point of heredity theory Swamiji is here discussing. And about that memory, Swamiji tells, though it is not necessary to prove reincarnation, but memory we do get. It's a remarkable statement in Vedanta and also Patanjali's Raja Yoga that when we are going to become free, when we have become so pure, we get the memory of all our past lives. And it's actually that which gives us the supreme vairagya and pushes us, as it were, into the realization of our own real nature. That is called Jati Smaratva. It comes to everyone. So not only memory is not necessary to establish reincarnation, but the fact is that we do get memory of our past lives. Everybody gets his memory before he becomes totally free. In between, Swamiji brought instinct, and he showed that instinct is the result of repeated conscious action. And so it is nothing but the involved reason. Now, we come to this point. The simple hereditary theory takes for granted the most astonishing proposition without any proof, that mental experience can be recorded in matter, in gross matter. Mind also is matter, but it is very subtle matter. And the sanskaras or the impressions remain there, not in the body. That mental experience can be involved in matter. When I look at you, Swamiji is explaining now mental impressions. When I look at you, in the lake of my mind there is a wave. That wave subsides, but it remains in fine form as an impression. It subsides, but remains not only as an impression, but also the possibility of recurrence of that wave. We understand a physical impression remaining in the body, but what proof is there for assuming that the mental impression can remain in the body? Since the body goes to pieces, body destroys, then how that mental impression can remain? What carries it? Even granting it were possible for each mental impression to remain in the body, that every impression, beginning from the first man down to my father, was in my father's body, how could it be transmitted to me? They call it genes, through the bioplasmic cell. How could that be? Because the father's body does not come to the child in toto. The same parents may have a number of children. Then from this theory of hereditary transmission, where the impression and the impressed, that is to say the material, are one, it rigorously follows that by the birth of every child, the parents must lose a part of their own impressions. Or if the parents should transmit the whole of their impression, then after the birth of the first child, their mind should be a vacuum. So if physical impression is there, then that will become finished. Or little is given to one child, remaining to other child. It is not physical at all. Impression is not given at all. The body is given. Again, if in the bioplasmic cell, the infinite amount of impressions from all time has entered, where and how is it? Where is that impression? In the bioplasmic cell? This is the most impossible position. And until these physiologists can prove how and where those impressions live in that cell and what they mean by a mental impression sleeping in the physical cell, their position cannot be taken for granted. From this, something else was coming to my mind. We see that different children of the same parents, why their nature is totally different if it was hereditary. And why we see from absolutely materialistic parents, spiritual children are born and vice versa. From very good spiritual parents, why materialistic boys are born. So physical heredity is simply impossible. So far it is clear there now. Another point which is coming to my mind now. Okay. Parents have not created the children. Parents have not created the children. Parents have supplied bodies to those children. Their souls have been eternally present with different mental sanskaras. So, one important psychological point is coming here. All parents should remember this. They say that we have given the best sanskaras to the children. And when the children do not behave as per parents' wishes, parents become frustrated. That is based upon a very wrong assumption. Each soul is moving in its own groove, with its own impressions. You are not at all responsible, you are not at all creators, you have no right. You have supplied them bodies, you care for their bodies, you can care for their intellectual development, but you are not caused nor are responsible nor should expect that they will behave as you want to behave. I sometimes heard a discussion in Goa. One industrialist, Brahmin by caste, he wanted his son to become an industrialist. The son also studied engineering, but he was interested in teaching that engineering, academic. Now there was an argument in their house. Should he not follow the profession of his father? I said, tell me, has the father followed the profession of his parents? Were they not priests once upon a time? Were they not Brahmins given only to culture of education? How he became an industrialist? So, each man grows according to his own sanskaras. And this, if we remember, we will be free from a lot of frustration. This frustration word in Sanskrit is called apeksha bhanga. One of my teachers used to say, there is apeksha bhanga because our apeksha was wrong. So it has to come to a distant point. Our apeksha about our children is entirely misplaced. We can try to give them the best atmosphere, nothing beyond that. And so, this is the point. From here follows that it is not hereditary transmission. Only body you have supplied, you have not created that children, and so you have no right over them, and they will grow according to their own sanskaras. Again, if in the bioplasmic cell the infinite amount of impressions from all time has entered, where and how is it? This is the most impossible position until these physiologists can prove how and where those impressions live in that cell and what they mean by a mental impression sleeping in the physical cell. Their position cannot be taken for granted. So far it is clear then that the impression is in the mind, that the mind comes to take its birth and rebirth and uses the material which is most proper for it, and that the mind which has made itself fit for only a particular kind of body will have to wait until it gets that material. This we understand. The theory then comes to this, that there is hereditary transmission so far as furnishing the material to the soul is concerned, but the soul migrates and manufactures body after body, and each thought we think and each deed we do is stored in it in fine forms, ready to spring up again and take a new shape. Body is made by our mind. The parents have not given the body. Parents have given the material for the body. Now the tree grows from a soil almost. And does it grow like the soil? Does it grow like the water, like the air? It grows according to what is stored in that seed. So these sanskaras which are in every person, they grow according to that. And it is the mind which makes the body. So, why all men or women do not have the same type of body? Man is man, humanity is humanity, because certain things are common in our mind as human beings, certain things are common in our body as human beings. Tiger, cow, like that our body is not there. But we have 2 nostrils, 2 ears, 2 eyes. Tell me, which 2 persons have the same shape of ears, nose and ear and eyes and mouth and neck? Why? From where this has come? It has come according to the mind which was present at the time of death of the last body, and that mind has come to this body now, mind has come to these parents now, and from the material supplied by the parent the mind is growing its own, developing its own body. According to the nature, there is a science called physiognomy, and generally the spiritual people, Sri Ramakrishna was so much expert in this physiognomy that his disciple Swami Sardan says, we thought that there might be a book on this subject, and we searched the whole world, we could not find a book. So, it is the spiritual people, that means those who can see the inside, the mind of man, they can connect and tell that this physical symptom describes this particular type of mind. And Sri Ramakrishna used to, by seeing people, he could understand their inner character. So from the body, mind is found out because the body has been made by the mind. Important point we got. Hereditary transmission, not even the body is given. The material for the body is given. And that proper material, the soul, that means what is soul? Consciousness plus mind. And this consciousness plus mind, according to the nature of the mind, makes a body. And so we find some similarity between brothers and sisters, but a lot of variation also. So, all this variation is due to the impressions in the mind. I want to refer to another, maybe relevant or not, you find out. I do not know the present position, but long back, 40, 50 years back perhaps, Lucknow University in India had a department of parapsychology. That means psychology beyond the normal psychology. And I tell you the fantastic result they had found. We generally hear of a split personality. They say take the photo of a man and vertically cut it into two from the center, from the head through the nose, cut it into two. And replicate the left part on the right and make it one picture. Replicate the right part on the left and make a picture. And you will find so much divergence. And you may find that Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, you know perhaps, you will find that the criminal or the bad side of the person becomes full more in one of the pictures and the good side becomes developed in the other picture. So, from the shape of the body, we can find out the nature of the mind, and from that mind this body was made. If he had two types of sanskaras, then the left and the right are different in his body. And some bodies are very harmonious or symmetrical, very symmetrical. You will find when we make images and pictures of gods and goddesses, the difference between them and human beings is this particular difference you will mark. All the gods and goddesses bodies we made exactly symmetrical. But in human beings, it is very rare to find a perfectly symmetrical body. Anyway, so these are offshoots of this theory of the mental impressions creating the body. When I look at you, a wave rises in my mind, it dives down as it were and becomes finer and finer, but it does not die. It is ready to start up again as a wave in the shape of memory. So all these impressions are in my mind, and when I die, the resultant force of them will be upon me, resultant. Swamiji has given an example for the resultant. A ball is here, and each one of us takes a mallet in his hands and strikes the ball from all sides. The ball goes from point to point in the room, and when it reaches the door, it flies out. What does it carry out with it? The resultant of all these blows. That will give it its direction. So what directs the soul when the body dies? The resultant, the sum total of all the works it has done, of the thoughts it has thought. Not only the work makes an impression, thought makes an impression, speech makes an impression. If the resultant is such that it has to manufacture a new body for further experience, it will go to those parents who are ready to supply it with suitable material for that body. Thus from body to body it will go, sometimes to heaven and back again to earth, becoming man or some lower animals. Yes, there are so many impressions are there. All cannot be manifested in one birth. So going to heaven, remaining impressions are there that if they are bad, they will become a lower animal. If they are normal, it will become a man. Yet, so all these things are known to Vedanta. This way it will go on until it has finished its experiences and completed this circle. It is not unending. If it comes to knowledge of his real nature, there is no impression. Impressions gather round the I consciousness, which is the center of the mind, and there the impressions lie. If there is no I, there are no impressions. And this I gets dissolved in its real nature. Then only the impressions will die, not till then. It then knows its own nature, knows what it is, and ignorance vanishes. That means identification with this mind and body vanishes. Its power becomes manifest. It becomes perfect. No more is there any necessity for the soul to work through physical bodies, nor is there any necessity for it to work through finer or mental bodies. It shines in its own light and is free, no more to be born, no more to die. So when this I consciousness, which is a reflection, knows its real nature, then it dissociates itself from the mind also. Body is destroyed in every life, mind continues with its impression, but when the full illumination comes, it becomes also dissociated and man regains his real nature. It does not require mind, it does not require a body then. We will not go now into the particulars of this. So Swamiji has given the general hints upon the Punarjanma and hereditary theory. Now he uses that Punarjanma theory for another angle. But I will bring before you one more point with regard to this theory of reincarnation. It is the theory that advances the freedom of the human soul. I do not depend upon anybody. Nobody depends upon me. I grow according to my sanskaras. I can change my sanskaras. If particular actions or thoughts have brought me to this, I can have new thoughts and new actions, and those will be destroying the old actions. And if I become free, nothing will bind me. So, responsibility is put on shoulders of a man. And also the freedom. Together these things go. You are not dependent on others, one point. You cannot blame anybody for anything in your life. You are growing according to your sanskaras. That Swamiji will beautifully make out now. Most important point of this theory. It is the one theory that does not lay the blame of all our weakness upon somebody else, which is a common human fallacy. Common human fallacy, you understand? Common in man, but wrong. Wrong, but common in man. Common human fallacy. That means fallacy means appears beautiful but is wrong. That is called a fallacy. Appears rational but it is irrational. That is called fallacy. And common to all of us, generality of us, because it is human. Being common does not prove it is right. It is wrong. So, we do not look at our own faults. The eyes do not see themselves. They see the eyes of everybody else. Jesus said, to draw out a mole from others' eyes, you remove the beam from your eyes first. We human beings are very slow to recognize our own weakness, our own faults. So long as we can lay the blame upon somebody else. We can lay the blame on somebody, then we are free. We do not look at our faults at all. Men in general lay all the blame of life on their fellow men, or failing that on God, or they conjure up a ghost and say it is fate. 3. Either on some known person. He is doing mischief. He is not allowing me to grow. He is the cause of all misery. Very common human fallacy which is absolutely wrong. Nobody in this world can make anybody else miserable. It is our mind and ego that only makes us miserable. Nobody else in the world can add misery or happiness to our life. It is the work of our own past impressions, and we can change it. Secondly, if not on people, we say, oh, God has done like that, God has done like that. What can I do? God or Bhagavan Krishna says in the Gita, Nadatte kasyajit papam naicheva sukrutam vivu. I am not responsible for your happiness or misery. You are yourself responsible. Third is, whether they believe on God or not, we say fate. I was destined to die, so I died. Destined. Destiny is made out of our sanskaras which we have generated by our own works, thoughts and speech. That Swamiji is making very clear now. Two sides. We are not dependent on anybody. Nobody is responsible for our life. We are responsible. We see in the various Upanishads, the blame or credit is given to the student. You have not asked that question. Why will you listen to that? So it is the sadhaka that is responsible for his own life. Where is fate and who is fate? We reap what we sow. We are the makers of our own fate. None else has the blame, none else has the praise. The wind is blowing. Now Swamiji has taken up an example from Sri Ramakrishna. The wind is blowing. Those vessels whose sails are unfurled catch it and go forward on their way. But those which have their sails, unfurled and furled. If this sail is unfurled, opened, then it catches the wind. And if it is furled, kept closed, it cannot catch the wind. But those which have their sails furled do not catch the wind. Is that the fault of the wind? Is it the fault of the merciful Father, whose wind of mercy is blowing without ceasing day and night, whose mercy knows no decay? Is it his fault that some of us are happy and some unhappy? Wonderful thing. And the sages, they know this well. You remember Swami Ramakrishnananda's expression. When they were passing through very difficult days externally, somebody said that God is not kind to us these days. He said, don't talk like that. God is kindness by his very nature. Now at present we are passing through unpleasant kindness. Then pleasant kindness would come. That is what he said. Little unpleasant and we start blaming God. We make our own destiny. Example, his sun shines for the weak as well as for the strong. His wind blows for saint and sinner alike. He is the Lord of all, the Father of all, merciful and impartial. Important thing. He does favor to his devotees, then he is partial. No. It is the quality of the devotion that makes him happy or attached to God or favor or go towards God. God is same. समोहम सर्वभूतेषु न मे द्वेष्योस्ति न प्रिया ये भजन्ति तो माम भक्त्या मयि ते तेषु चाप्यहम्. I am same to everybody, nobody is dear to me, nobody is I hate. But if a man has devotion, he experiences that God lives in them and he lives in God. This experience is due to his devotion, not due to God's partiality. And he is kind to all because the wind of his kindness is blowing. If you unfurl your sail, you will get it. Wonderful new light Swamiji has brought from this theory of incarnation. Do you mean to say that he, the Lord of creation, looks upon the petty things of our life in the same light as we do? These are petty things of our life. Our quarrels and our all that, and God is not on our side, and God is not, see, these petty things of our life. What a degenerate idea of God that would be. We are like little puppies, making life and death struggles here, and foolishly thinking that even God himself will take it as seriously as we do. Pray. Swami just turned all this theory of Punarjanma in a wonderful way. He knows what the puppy's play means. Puppy's example, on the street, dogs fight. The owners should not get involved in that. We are all puppies in the hands of God. We fight does not make God involved. And it is a common God for all, we are all puppies under him. Our attempts to lay the blame on him, making him the punisher and the rewarder, are only foolish. Another thing, very important thing, if you do something wrong, God punishes us. If you do something right, God rewards us. He says, no, if you do something wrong, we suffer. If you do something right, we get. Why involve God in that? We get what we deserve. If you have done bad, we will suffer. If you have done good, we will get good results. So this punisher and the rewarder are only foolish. Yes. He neither punishes nor rewards any. His infinite mercy is open to everyone at all times, in all places, under all conditions, unfailing, unswerving. So whenever we think of God, we must know that He is Sarvajna, Sarvashakti and Parama Karuni. That will solve the problems of our life. Upon us depends how we use it. Upon us depends how we utilize it. Blame neither man nor God nor anyone in the world. When you find yourself suffering, blame yourself and try to do better. Some people blame the circumstances, fate. And very often, Karna's example is quoted to show that because of the circumstances, he got bad results. Remember, Karna has the strength of Duryodhana lay in Karna. And Karna has supported every weak action of Duryodhana, every wrong action of Duryodhana, every crime and sin of Duryodhana, Karna has supported. Otherwise Duryodhana could not have ventured to do all these wrong things. And so, Karna has himself to blame for his fate. Nobody else. No circumstances. People being born not knowing their parents, do we not have other examples? Do we not have Kabir? And he became a big saint. So all this circumstance theory is of no use. We are responsible. This is the only solution of the problem. Those that blame others, and alas, the number of them is increasing every day, are generally miserable. With helpless brain, they have brought themselves to that pass through their own mistakes and blame others. But this does not alter their position. So, blaming others is not only wrong, but blaming others leaves us with no solution. Blaming others will not improve us. If we know our faults, we have to correct them. If they faults in the past life, in this life we can correct them. It does not serve them in any way. It is not helpful at all in any way by blaming others. This attempt to throw the blame upon others only weakens them the more. Therefore, blame none for your own faults. Stand upon your own feet and take the whole responsibility upon yourself. Say, this misery that I am suffering is of my own doing, and that very thing proves that it will have to be undone by me alone. That which I created, I can demolish. That which is created by someone else, I shall never be able to destroy. Therefore, stand up, be bold, be strong, take the whole responsibility on your own shoulders, and know that you are the creator of your own destiny. All the strength and succor you want is within yourself. Therefore, make your own future. Let the dead past bury its dead. That is from a poem, Longfellow's. The infinite future is before you, infinite. And you must always remember that each word, thought, and deed lays up a store for you. Sanskaras are born from thought, word, and deed. And that as the bad thoughts and bad works are ready to spring upon you like tigers, so also there is the inspiring hope that the good thoughts and good deeds are ready with the power of 100,000 angels to defend you always and forever. Here, by the Swamiji's expression of angels and tigers, I remember something different. Dr. Sigmund Freud, he stated that if I cannot invoke the angels of heaven, I can let loose the devils of hell. That means the bad impressions of a man he saw, the good impressions lie still deeper and he was not aware of it. He knew that he is not aware of it. So, those who are influenced by Dr. Sigmund Freud, to them I am telling, what he saw was from patients only, and that is superficial depth, little depth. But beyond that, he could not. He says, if I cannot invoke the angels of heaven, heaven, our own deeper spiritual mind, angels, all those things which will be helpful to us, he cannot invoke them. He has let loose the devils of hell, those who are in the nearer, deeper points of our mind. So, this Swamiji's expression, angels, will all be there to help us. So, it depends upon our cultivation. If you go to any place, say the great Belur Math. Now, Belur Math has two different parts psychologically. My Guruji told me when I was going to Belur Math first time, Belur Math is the headquarters of both Ramakrishna Math and Ramakrishna Mission. And Belur Math is a math itself, where Thakur's relics are there, where all disciples of Thakur lived. So my teacher told me that in Belur Math, if you mix in the thought currents, it's like a vortex and you will be crushed. But if you go to some secluded place in Belur Math and sit for meditation, you will find that all Thakur's disciples are helping you. Now, from this let me develop something for the students. A student goes to a class where there may be 40 students, boys and girls. And what happens? If you are spiritually inclined, then I am talking. If you are spiritually inclined, you are not finding people like you. Because the generality is not interested. But if you wait, observe, you will find that there are other boys and girls who are equally spiritually interested. They are also trying to find out. So in a class of 40, if you get 4 spiritually inclined people, make friends with them. And see, your sanskaras will grow. And if you remain to please all the 40, you will be crushed. You can have hello, hi relation with everybody. But observe, slowly find out who is inclined like you and make friendship with him or her. So from this Swamiji's theory, so many new thoughts are coming. How to conduct our own life. So, we thought on the last occasion that very little portion is remained. But this little portion had so much value and truth for us. We have a lot of time, we can touch the next lecture, or we can stop here. I think better stop here because these are very deeper ideas and we can connect macrocosm and microcosm lectures and remember those points together and how to conduct our life will be more clear. So let us stop here. On the next Thursday we will take up the next lecture called Immortality. Om Paratatve Sada Lino Ramakrishna Samagya Yo Dharma Sthapana Rato Viresham Tam Namamyaham. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hare Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanam.